question is about education. What am I going to do that's different? And the right answer is education is very important. Everybody needs an education, right? I'm going to tell you this. Let me start with big picture in the Trump era, and then I'm going to talk about specifically what's on my agenda to change for education. So I'm going to talk about it in two ways that are different than anybody else. One of the things you're going to get from me in the next hour is I'll talk openly when I think that Phil Murphy has done a poor job on something, and I'll tell you when I think he's done a good job on something, when you hit those notes. I think he's done a good job of funding education and the pensions and being committed to that. He deserves credit for that. I think he's done a poor job of being bold and leaning into certain issues. Okay? I think he's risk averse and conflict averse, which isn't always good for a leadership position. Specifically in a time where you have the president who's dismantling the Federal Department of Education, every one of the other candidates came out and they said, this is terrible, we're going to fight this, and nobody said anything about what we're going to do. Okay? I think the most important thing that we should learn from what's happening on the federal government, and Phil should be showing some leadership on, is that if you look at the state constitution, what education looks like in New Jersey and what the Department of Education looks like on the state front is not codified. The only thing in the state constitution defines that everybody's entitled to a fair and equivalent education. But what the Department of Education looks like for the state of New Jersey is gray. It is subject to who the governor is and what the legislature looks like. And I think that if there's anything that we've learned in the last 3-4 months, or the last 2 months, it feels much longer, right, is that if you have a governor elected that is a Republican, which will eventually happen in the state of New Jersey, hopefully not November, but at some point it will happen, okay? And if that does happen, the rules have changed over the last 60 days with how people approach education. And I think it's very important for the governor to push for a constitutional amendment to codify what education looks like in New Jersey, to protect it so you're not having religion taught in school, so some of the conversation around gender identity isn't pushed from a Republican standpoint where it's outing kids prematurely. Things like that, just controlling what that looks like broadly is very important. So that's number one. It's a difference in a Trump administration. The second thing I would tell you is that on the school funding formula, okay, it drives your property taxes in a big way. The most important thing that I would like to change on that is how you fund special education. The special education component today is municipality by municipality, and if you don't offer the services, you have to pay the other municipality in order to compensate for that kid to get the necessary resources, which is good, but it's very expensive. It is a huge driver on how your property taxes work. Okay? And I think that we should absorb that in the state from a comprehensive standpoint as it relates to thinking about special education funded by the state, not the municipalities. It'll drive down your property taxes and deliver a better product ultimately. I would also tell you that there's two parts to our education platform if you were to look at it. It focuses on early childhood development, which I think Phil has done a good job. We would continue to expand the universal pre-K program in phases because you got to make sure it's cost effective. And the second part is particularly around higher education, where you do need some consolidation. And I talk a lot about how we're going to change the funding situation for that. You're paying roughly the program as it exists today in New Jersey on higher education. Also, this all impacts your property taxes, but it's based on not a set rate. It's based on the university's tuition rate. Okay, so the state will compensate for a low-income child a percentage, a very large percentage, of the tuition for XYZ university. It's a perverse incentive for the tuition to be increased to compensate the university. You understand how that works ultimately? And that needs to change. I talk about it because I know it, because I see it in Jersey City all the time. We have NJCU, we have St. Peter's, we have Hudson County Community College, so I have familiarity with this stuff. But those things can change and impact your property taxes. On consolidation, which is another part of your question, but it is a big part of our platform on how do you force consolidation. And the way to force consolidation to me is you make it more difficult for mayors to be able to go to the bond market. So today when the schools and most of your municipalities have to go raise capital or bond for something, it goes to a referendum. When mayors do it, they don't. Creating more checks and accountability in that will force leverage from the state to force accountability when it fails. So the school boards on consolidation is a broader thing. The school district consolidation is part of the conversation, broader consolidation, okay? people are pretty possessive of their schools because generally people feel pretty good about their schools. You could force consolidation. The goal of consolidation is to drive down property taxes, right? To drive down cost of government. It's easier to do it on the municipal, on the government side that is on the school side, to be perfectly honest with you, because people are less protective about their Department of Public Works than they are about their schools, right? I mean, that's the reality of that. Does that make sense? Okay.
Vote for Steve on June 10th. He's working for all of us.